I'm Jenni Carlson.
I'm Barry Tramel. Welcome to the Jenni and Berry Show. The 2023 Sooner football season, or the 2024 Sooner football season began, depending on your point of view, with a 38-24 loss to Arizona last week in the Alamo Bowl. OU saw a lot of good things out of freshman quarterback Jackson Arnold, but he also committed 4 of the Sooners' 6 turnovers. What did we learn about OU's new franchise quarterback in San Antonio?
Hey, we'll talk about all that and a lot more, but first we want to thank our sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Berry Show. MidFirst Bank, Laser Light Skin Clinic, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. And hey, let's face it, a box of pizza and a case of beer just don't work like they used to when you're trying to move. Nobody wants to help you. But we know two fellas that love moving. At Two Fellas Moving Company, we offer free, no strings quotes for your move. With more than 20 years experience, we've pretty much moved it all. Our services don't end at moving either. Need to do some remodeling or spring cleaning? We've got you covered with dumpster rentals and junk haul services. Remember, quotes are free and there are no strings attached. If you're moving in Oklahoma, make sure to call the fellas. Visit twofellas.com for your free quote today. All right, Barry. Hey, you and I were down in San Antonio for that Alamo Bowl. Lots of anticipation building around the Jackson Arnold debut as a starter. Wasn't exactly as good as people had hoped, but what are we to make of Jackson Arnold now after his debut and his 4 turnovers?
Well, it was a little bit of wide disparity of performance, right? Lots to like about Jackson Arnold. Lots of big throws, lots of poise, mobile, but those 4 turnovers will kill you. They did kill the Sooners, 6 actually. Might got away with only 4, got away with a victory. But the key is that just first start jitters? Is that just first start unfamiliarity with such a stage? Is there any reason to think that will carry over? That's the unanswerable question, because in modern football, 2 turnovers a game is not acceptable from a quarterback, much less 4. But will he grow out of that quickly? He needs to. But, man, if he could get rid of the turnovers, I think the Sooners do indeed have a really special talent on their hands. I was very impressed with Jackson Arnold, other than those mistakes. Of course, that goes back to Mrs. Lincoln and Ford Theater, so you can't throw those out. But he looked the part to me. He looked the part, and then you had the turnovers.
Yeah, the turnovers were a bummer, and there were looked to be late on some throws. That seemed to be the biggest issue, especially early. Those first quarter turnovers seemed like he had some guys, but then defenders jumped the route and got to it quicker than the receiver could. So, obviously it wasn't a great start, but I thought the way that Jackson Arnold rallied after those early mistakes, he didn't go into a shell. They came back after giving up 13 unanswered points early. Then they scored a bunch of their own unanswered points. Obviously that's two-sided coin when they, are getting stops defensively too. But I thought Arnold, didn't wilt. He hung in there and had him, with a chance to win that ball game in the fourth quarter. Obviously, when you've got receivers, Jalil Farouk, the main culprit, obviously, with 2 turnovers himself, on balls that he should have caught and controlled, Barry. The first one, he ran with it before it gets stripped. The second one, he gets hit as the ball gets there, bounces out and is basically caught in the air. So, not helping Jackson Arnold with a couple of passes that should have been catches, instead were fumbles and losses for the Sooners. So you got to get a little more help. And I think it'll be interesting to see what the offensive line looks like moving forward, Barry, because that was a unit that got hit really hard by departures and opt-outs. And so Jackson Arnold's playing behind guys that he's not sure what they're going to play like. I didn't sense any panic out of him. Did you? Did you sense that the offensive line was part of that, or was this more of a Jackson Arnold just not making throws that were quite good enough?
Well, I didn't think the offensive line was great, and I thought they made a lot of mistakes, but I thought in a lot of ways they protected him pretty well. I think you mentioned this to me. They get 6 holding calls on the Sooners, offensive holding calls, all on pass plays. But a couple of those came when they gave Jackson Arnold all day to throw. 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, and he really doesn't do anything with it, just stands back there waiting for somebody to get open, and eventually somebody holds. And that's, I'm not sure that's on the offensive line. I'm not even sure it's on Jackson Arnold. Maybe it's on those receivers. You get 6 seconds to get open. Somebody ought to get open. But, I thought it was an uneven day for the offensive line. But considering its makeshift status with a couple of starters gone, I thought they did okay. And I think that doesn't bode poorly for the future.
And
I think Arnold's mobility shone through. I think sometimes he just needs to tuck it and run quicker, maybe even.
Yeah, and maybe he was a little gun shy about running. I don't know, but he looks like he's a capable runner. That's been a part of his game since the beginning, basically. So I would assume that's something that he'll probably be. I'm sure they're going to talk about it. Hey, listen, you can't stand back there that long. It's not going to work. So in those instances, if he runs, even if he just gets a couple yards, he doesn't have to have a big gainer. But don't get those holding penalties. Those are killer, and they were killer. A lot of situations where the Sooners found themselves in a deep hole. But Barry, as we're talking about remade offensive line and all of this, it's obviously. This was a game for OU, as a lot of these bowl games have become, instead of an end to a season, a beginning of the next season. And obviously with the turnover on offense, this was definitely a look ahead to 2024. But you can't think about 2024 if you're the Sooners and not think about the SEC. So considering what we saw at Jackson Arnold, only one game, but what do you feel about OU headed to the SEC with Jackson Arnold as the guy at quarterback? Better or worse at this point?
I actually felt a little better just because, we'd heard so much about Jackson Arnold now for a year and a half, 2 years, really. When he was a senior down in Denton, hey, he's the future. He's going to be great. And then the year here in Norman, hey, he's going to be great. He's going to be great. And then we saw him, and he threw it around to Arizona. That's not good. But we saw what people were talking about, right? The big arm, the home run ball, the mobility, all those things. He's certainly capable. And I came away thinking, you know what? I think they do have the right guy. It sounds like they've got a potential star quarterback. If you don't have a star quarterback, the next best thing is a potential star quarterback. And that's what they've got. And a lot of the, Danny Stutzman led the charge, but a lot of the teammates after the game, endorsed Arnold. Really without a lot of pushing from the media. And Stutzman grabbed Arnold walking off the field and was talking to him and told us, he said, hey, you're the guy. This is going to go great, blah, blah, blah. So I came away encouraged. I think OU will be ahead of the curve at quarterback going into the SEC. Can't have 4 turnovers. Can't have 2 a game. But I came away thinking, you know what? I think the guy's the real deal. I'm encouraged.
Well, I think he's going to be fine long term, but I do think he's going to be a first-year starter in the SEC next year. And there's going to be times when he may not turn it over 4 times, but he's going to make mistakes. And he's going to make mistakes that Dillon Gabriel probably wouldn't have made. And so I think people probably just have to come to grips with that people have been saying it. I'm not saying anything new in terms of the ceiling is probably likely higher for Jackson Arnold than it is for Dillon Gabriel. What he can be is probably a better quarterback than Dillon Gabriel could eventually be. We saw it on some of those deep throws, Barry. It looks so effortless. That throw to Nick Anderson in the side of the end zone, corner of the end zone, puts it on a line. And frankly, the catch by Nick Anderson was unbelievable too, getting his toe dragged there in the end zone. But those are the type of throws that really make you sit up and go, okay, this guy has got some skill that developed, go through the spring, go through the fall. He could be a whole heck of a lot better come, September when the Sooners open at home with 3 non-conference games that they should win pretty easily. I think those are going to be important games for Jackson Arnold to continue to develop, evolve, because then it hits. Then the SEC hits, and he's going to have to be ready to go. But to me, Barry, I assume that there's going to be games when he has, some struggles, when he throws it to the other team, when he doesn't play great. That's what first-year starters at quarterback do. And in the SEC, I have zero doubt that's what they do. It's going to happen. So Oklahoma's going to have to, come to grips, both players, coaches, and fans, with the fact that that's just likely to happen. And then they're going to have to figure out, can we make up for it? Can the defense stand up? Can it do its job? Can the offense bounce back and do its job? They're just going to have, in their mind that there are likely to be times when he has mistakes out there.
Yeah, and when you talked about his star power or the things you saw that were really, you mentioned the pass to Nick Anderson. He's moving to his left and throwing against his body with that great pass. So he clearly has the talent. You're right. First-year quarterbacks do struggle. Just look at Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel, much better his second year at OU, and this was after 3 years at UCF. So each year is going to get better, and yeah, he'll have some growing pains. That's why the schedule sets up really well. I know we talked a lot about the stiffness and the toughness of this OU schedule, but the schedule sets up really well for the Sooners. You mentioned those 3 games. Temple, Houston, Tulane, I think is the order. I can't really remember, but better that than, having Michigan or somebody in week 2. But it does set up to give him some runway to get more comfortable before the likes of Tennessee and Ole Miss and LSU and eventually Alabama come around. But I think the Sooners are pleased that they do have the talent level quarterback that they think they need. Yeah. And they can live with the experience part. We'll see how he develops. He played a high level of high school football, so he's Texas Class 5A in Denton is as good as it gets. So he's been as prepared as possible. And the Sooners will have to live with the growing pains. They had 6. Here's the way I look at it. They had 6 turnovers in the Alamo Bowl against a really good team, and still could have won. Yeah. Drop that to 5, you probably win. Drop that to 4, you do win. Yeah. So they're silver linings, but you're right. Growing pains probably going to be the norm throughout this season. And now the one thing I liked in San Antonio, though, despite the makeshift offensive line, despite the horrid start, which put OU in a 13-0 hole, the the running game really got going. Yeah. And to me, that's going to be a quarterback's best friend. If the Sooners can get Gavin Sawchuk running like he did against Arizona, he goes over 100 yards, does a great job. They hit some big plays. A year ago, the Sooners got a running game going against Florida State in the Orlando Bowl. If they can, they didn't really carry that over to this season or to the 23 season. If they can carry this one over to the 24 season, that's going to be the best thing that could happen to Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, I thought the running game was definitely a positive. I think, kind of quietly because, Dillon Gabriel, the success that he was having late in the regular season, and obviously the Jackson Arnold takeover became such big news. We kind of, the running game was just happening in the background, kind of just doing its thing. But I think Sawchuk really showed himself the last half of the season. He's very capable, went over 100 yards several times. So I think he's the guy heading forward you got to feel great about. I don't know if Javonte Barnes will ever really get back out there. We saw Tyree Walker as the other running back in the bowl game. He's transferred, announced he's headed off to Wisconsin, which frankly I think could suit him really well. Really tough runner. I assume the Badgers like tough runners over the years they have. I think they'll like him up there as well. So that leaves some incoming freshmen, Taylor Tatum. He's a huge recruit, best running back in the country. Does he become a guy that can step into, a role where he is part of this offense in a big way from day one? You've got Xavier Robinson, the big running back from Carl Albert, coming in the freshman class as well. So how do those guys factor in? I don't know, but Gavin Sawchuk, very fast. We saw him make some great plays out there. I thought that was very encouraging. Just continuing to build on what we've already seen out of him in the running game. I think it'd be good if they had some other guys to help in that regard, which I think sort of begs a question too, playmakers, as we watch, some of these SEC teams that Oklahoma is going to find itself facing in the not too distant future. You look around and you see playmakers out there, not just the quarterbacks. They got playmakers everywhere, running back, tight end, receiver. So Jackson Arnold, we believe he's going to be a guy who is pretty dynamic, eventually as the quarterback of the Sooners. What about around him? Gavin Sawchuk looks like a playmaker, but does he have enough other guys around him? Does he have enough playmakers right now?
Well, I don't know. Somebody like me might say no. I've actually been saying it for a couple of years. I think OU's wide receivers are annually overrated. Just because you throw a lot and you've got successful quarterbacks, it doesn't mean your wide receivers are an all-star crew. Clearly, the upper level talent is down from what we became accustomed to in Norman. When you look at Sterling Shepard and D.D. Westbrook, Hollywood Brown, into C.D. Lamb, Marvin Mims. I don't know if the Sooners have any of those players. Jalil Farouk, of course, was in many ways the go to the game with his 2 fumbles. Sooners are 15 yards from going up 31-13 in that game, and he bobbles that pass, and up it goes. And the kid from Maldonado from Arizona returns at 87 yards for a touchdown. Then it's anybody's game, and Arizona won it. So I'm skeptical that OU's receiving talent is as elite as we sometimes think it is. Now they got the new guy coming in from Purdue, who apparently is really good, Deion Burks. We also Andrelson Anthony from Michigan is off to a good start with the Sooners in 23. Has the knee injury, which is unfortunate. If he's back and doing well, all of a sudden that thing gets a lot deeper. Nick Anderson is a very good player. Al Ashbeck keeps telling me he's going to be a first-round draft pick. He doesn't go over the middle that much. They don't throw the ball to him that much. So some people need to believe it as much as others for that to happen. But I think the possibility is there for the receivers to be the playmakers that Oklahoma needs, but I don't know that they're there yet as the Sooners go into the SEC.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you look at Nick Anderson, you look at Jaden Gibson. Those guys look like big-time receivers. Tall, long strides, wide reach, guys that you think, okay, these guys are going to go up and make, really competitive catches, go high point the ball, grab it, bring it down. We haven't really seen in volume. We haven't really seen that from those guys. Drake Stoops was the go-to guy. And now he's out of eligibility. We couldn't have a Stoops that's a Sooner forever, I guess. But Drake Stoops eligibility out. And now, the question of who's next, who's that security blanket, but also, who's going to score a lot of touchdowns for this team. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I talked about freshmen coming in at running back. It's going to be interesting to see how these freshman wide receivers play into the plans, because this is they've got a big group of wide receivers coming in, but also very ballyhooed. Lots of 4-star type of guys coming in that, receivers a position that you can think about freshmen coming in and playing right away at that position and being very valuable. So, is there a guy, 2 guys more that could potentially be there? Because I agree, Barry, Marvin Mims was only, he was a Sooner a year ago. So it's not like they've been without sort of that dynamic guy for a long time, but you start to realize that, they don't have that Hollywood Brown. They don't have that D.D. Westbrook, that guy that can really go make a big time play. So they're looking, and, if Andrel Anthony's healthy and he becomes that guy, that would be huge. Maybe there's other guys out of the portal they'll be looking at, because there's still movement out there. So that's a potential area. I know we're going to talk about the portal in a sec, but that's an area where maybe they need to go look again for another guy.
Well, here's the thing. You brought up Drake Stoops. And, of course, the thing I think of when I think about Drake is the feel-good story, walk-on to indispensable receiver, all those things, all Big 12. But let's just ask a simple question. Who's going to go over the middle and catch passes next year? Literally, every game, almost every possession, the Sooners needed somebody to run a slant or a crossing pattern in traffic and make a tough catch, and they threw it to Drake Stoops almost every time. And almost every time he produced. That's a massive hole. They can probably find a home run guy easier than they can find a replacement for Drake Stoops, who 6 years ago wasn't even a scholarship recruit. So, Drake Stoops is going to be missed for much more than his name. He's going to be missed for that ability to get in the middle of the field and catch a pass and get whacked right as he catches it and hang on. So you're right. I think there's probably enough depth there that somebody could emerge. Maybe the portal comes back, but I'd feel better about Jackson Arnold if he had more help over the middle and more consistency out of that receiving corps.
Yeah, and the tight end position is a position that Oklahoma needs to step it up to. I mean, look around the SEC. Every team has got one or two tight ends that are always able to, when you talk about, making a big catch, sort of something short, 6-8 yards. A lot of times it's the tight end, and those guys are wildly valuable, and Oklahoma really hasn't had that guy for a little while now. So I don't know. Maybe they can go back to that almost fullback tight end hybrid type of player that they had that, whether you go back to the J.D. Runnels, sort of built from there, guys that Bob Stoops always loved to talk about. If they could get a guy or two like that, I think that would help offensively as well because, and I think it would be helpful to have guys that are, able to help in the blocking and all those sorts of things. But I think that tight end position could be really, really valuable moving into the SEC as well. Hey, before we talk a little bit more about portal, let's talk about the defense because Arizona's offense, pretty highly regarded. A lot of Pac-12 offenses are, but OU's defense, that was the side of the ball for the Sooners that really wasn't decimated by opt-outs or transfers. How'd you think the OU defense did against Arizona, and what does it sort of mean moving forward in your mind?
Oh, I thought they had a solid game. Rough first quarter. The offense wasn't doing anything. Sooners got behind the 8 ball, but they kept Arizona twice out of the end zone, made them kick short field goals. So instead of 17 or 21-0, the deficit was 13-0. They gave up the long pass for a touchdown. And then in the, late in the game, the fourth quarter, they gave up a long touchdown drive. But Arizona's offense came in widely acclaimed. Remember, we were all talking about the Noah Fafita, the freshman quarterback, had taken the Pac-12 by storm. And that was a real threat when the Sooners played Arizona. So I thought the defense held up pretty good. Now, it wasn't dominant. It wasn't great, but they stuffed the U of A run game. They made them go up top, and Arizona produced, but that's modern football that offenses are going to have their plays. So I thought the defense held up pretty good. The pass rush was excellent. A great game plan by Brent Venables went with more speed guys on the field. Kendall Dolby playing most of the time at Cheetah instead of Deshaun McCullough and doing some blitzing. Sooners blitzed a lot, really put their corners and DBs on an island, and mostly they held up, and they got to Fafita on a regular basis. So I was fairly encouraged by the play of the defense in that game. I don't think this was a game that was lost by the defense.
No, I would definitely agree with that. And they obviously got put behind the 8 ball with all those turnovers, and some of them, were pretty short fields that they were facing. So, I agree that there was a lot on this defense, but a few times I still would like to see this secondary cover better. Sometimes where receivers were catching the ball with, very little resistance. I think that was problematic for me. I'd like to see, especially late in the year when you've got guys that are really pretty veteran in those situations, you'd like to see that handled better. Some of it seemed like what you were talking about with those, guys in the secondary, maybe on an island, they weren't quite up on a guy like they needed to be. And then, he's able to make the catch and run a little bit. But sometimes it looked like guys were, sneaking into areas that weren't uncovered, or there was some miscommunication. I know that happens. What you said is right. Modern football creates those opportunities, and there are going to be mistakes here and there. But you'd really like to see a defense with, guys that are like I said, largely intact. You don't have a unit that is trying to figure things out with a bunch of new guys. I thought that would be a little bit better. So that was disappointing that we didn't see that on point more often than not. There was just some times that I thought, man, that's not good. And I think, again, what you said is right. It was the offense losing this game, but to lose another fourth quarter lead, that's Oklahoma's 3 losses this year. Again, late, they had leads and they weren't able to sustain them. And that's got to be on everybody. Everybody's got to take responsibility for that. So I think that's one of those things that, everybody has to feel like, hey, they made progress. They didn't lose as many close games as they did a year ago. Obviously started to turn the corner in that regard, but still have some work to do in finishing ball games and winning close games and not giving up those leads late. So that's something I'm sure that will continue to be a point of emphasis. Before we get out of here, talked about the portal a second ago and maybe some areas Oklahoma can look at, but we're going to continue to see guys getting into the portal, teams looking at them. What do you feel like, Barry? Where are the greatest needs for the Sooners? Receiver seems like it might maybe top of the list, but where do you think they're going to need to go as the portal activity continues to flow?
I think they need at least 1 and probably 2 more offensive linemen. The O-line getting wiped out. McQuaid Matire and Walter Rouse played, but they're in the Alamo Bowl, but their eligibility is gone. You had Andrew Rhyme and Tyler Guyton move on. So this is going to be a remade offensive line. Caden Green hits the portal. So brand new offensive line. Brent Venables already brought in 2 fellas from the offensive line. Said he wanted to bring in 4, so I assume he will. Some guys who have played it quite a bit will be back. Some guys who played in the bowl game will be back. Everett, Sexton, that crowd, they've shown promise, but clearly the depth for players ready to play, the depth is pretty small. So especially going into the SEC, that's a major thing. I would say that offensive line additions are vital to Jackson Arnold and the Sooners' 2024 fortunes in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's got to be a continued area of improvement, and the portal's the best way to get there, especially when you're talking about that position. Veteran guys, it's hard to build from within. You need some of those guys, but if you're looking for, instant improvement, you got to get into the portal on the line. We've seen it on the defensive side, Oklahoma going out and getting some guys that provided instant help. Some of those guys will return. I think they need to continue to go get defensive linemen, quite honestly, because you can never have enough of those. And I think linebacker is an area where they need to go maybe look for somebody veteran. I mean, obviously Stutzman, Kip Lewis, those 2 guys seem pretty well entrenched, playing really well. But I feel like that's still a pretty thin position with what Brent Venables wants. It is better this year than it was a year ago when we saw so many snaps for the linebackers that played. But I think that's an area where they could definitely use some more depth, some more talent, some more experience. Not necessarily, I don't know if it changes the starters, but I think that's one of those areas where you might need more bodies out there, more capable bodies. And it's just, I just don't know that they've got the inner ability, from within. They've had some guys that they've continued to try to develop, and we've just not seen them sort of come to the fore. So I think that might be a spot where, as Oklahoma looks to the SEC, maybe that's where they need to also buoy themselves in the portal. We'll see how that goes. As I said, portal's going to continue to go, so we'll continue to follow that. But that's all the time we've got this week. So we'll continue to cover the portal and the Sooner news cycle, which never stops. We'll have all sorts of OU content this week at selloutcrowd.com. And you can find Barry and I at barrytramel.com and jenni-carlson.com. And hey, if you want our content at your fingertips, we have got you covered with something super cool now in 2024. We have a new app. It's available for iPhone and Android, and you can download it today. If this happens to be your first time hearing or watching us, be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you like what you hear, please leave a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.